Welcome back to English Otherwise. My name is Mr. James, your guide, your guru, your mentor, and so much more. This is Breaking Down the News, the show in which I open my eyes, I crawl out of bed, and pour myself a couple cups of coffee. And then I start highlighting the headlines, then we jump in here, start picking them apart, breaking them down so that way then you can have a better understanding of what's going on in this weird, wild, and wacky world in which we live. But not only that, hopefully you get a few key takeaways. Some of those odd grammatical constructions or very visual vocabulary that exist within the headlines, so that way then you can put them in your pocket, pull them out later, better express yourself and impress others. And so, this is when I say, dobre rano, Zdenek, and good morning, mushrooms, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, brothers, sisters, mothers, misters, and to all my cousins out there around the world, it's time to plug in. Let's get the train chugging. And yes, sad news when I opened the computer this morning. 10 people have been killed in another mass shooting in the U.S., this time at a supermarket in Boulder, Colorado. Here we've got a reduced passive, and I chose the present perfect passive, have been killed, because of the fact that it relates to the present. And these people are no longer with us, and the immediacy with which it's happening, focusing on the effect of the actions that, like as I said, the people are no longer with us. Our hearts go out to the friends and families of the victims. It's awful. And what's happening with America? Here we go in the caption. Please say that an officer was among those killed in the shooting in Boulder, Colorado. A suspect is now in custody. And the most important thing is that the suspect is in custody. He is being held by the police in a jail cell, most likely, and he will be held pretty much indefinitely for questioning and for then trial and probably going to jail. But a police officer was among those. Those what? Those people. Those people who were killed or who have been killed. And so it just an interesting construction here with the determiner. They drop the noun because it's obvious, and then another reduced passive. Let's carry on. Witnesses describe chaos. Now, chaos appears on the show a little bit too often, and that's the complete absence of rules and order. It is anarchy coming from ancient Greece and ancient Greek, the language, meaning the void, just an emptiness in which there are no rules or regulations, and therefore anything can happen. And they describe chaos as the shooter opened fire. When the gun, we shoot a gun, but we also say to fire a gun, and so when somebody opens fire, it means that they start shooting. Moving on, people were seen, again, another reduced passive, simple passive here. People were seen lying on the ground in an eyewitness video. Now, eyewitness, you could just say witness, because to witness something, and then henceforth you are a witness, means that you saw it. But we say eyewitness, especially for somebody who saw I'm gonna sneeze again. Who saw everything as it was happening, as the events were unfolding, not somebody who just came upon it afterwards. They actually physically saw it happen. Let's move on. And interesting, and probably, in my opinion, a sad choice of headlines here by the CNN writers. Trump's army takes aim at 2022, touting his election lies. And I say a sad choice of words in the headlines here, because taking aim at, that's a poor choice while when a mass shooting has just happened. And yeah, it seems a little bit insensitive to use this in a figurative sense when we actually have this going on in a very literal sense, as we saw up above. To take aim at something, though, means that you're focused on it, and that is your goal. His goal is the 2022 elections, and his army of followers, his group of followers that do seem sadly and disturbingly militant, are touting his election lies. They are promoting his election lies just like a brand will tout the effects of their new miracle toothpaste or shampoo and its regenerative properties for what it can do for your hair. Looks like I could probably use a bit of shampoo at the moment. But yes, touting the regenerative effects of the shampoo, touting his lies, promoting them, spreading them further, and sadly with probably more people believing them. Let's keep it moving. On to some more dark and disturbing news about the dark web. Yes, all sorts of illicit and illegal activities take place around the dark web, but surprise, COVID-19 vaccines and counterfeit vaccine cards are for sale out there on the dark web. If something is counterfeit, it is not real, it is not authentic, it's not genuine, it's not true, it's not the real article. And so, yes, counterfeit vaccine cards, so that way people can falsely and incorrectly present themselves as having been vaccinated, so that way they can maybe have greater freedom of travel and things. Well, obviously it didn't take them long to start selling this. People out there will sell anything for $1. Come on, let's all work together, try and make this a safer, better place. Enough of this counterfeit vaccine cards and, well, counterfeit vaccines. Moving on. Some other, from the other mass shooting that we had just last week of predominantly Asian American victims at a series of spas in Atlanta, police handcuffed the husband of one of the spa shooting victims for hours while she lay dead. And here, lie, lay, lain. Now, we've got the two verbs, though, to lie and to lay. To lay is about motion, of setting something down, laying it in place, whereas to lie means to be already in a position, having been laid previously. Now, it gets confusing because the past tense of to lie is lay. Lie, lay, lain. And so she lay there dead, past tense, and he had to remain there handcuffed, in handcuffs, by the police, and waiting for questioning, quite possibly within visual distance of his now dead wife. That is a bit disturbing. Things probably could have been done a little bit better. Now, it is true that very often husbands, ex-husbands, boyfriends, ex-boyfriends are the primary suspects in murders. However, that seems a bit insensitive. They probably could have, should have, would have done that better had they been a little bit more sensitive to the situation. I don't know. Moving on to Australia, a new report emerges of lewd acts in the Australian Parliament. And if something emerges, it's coming into light, it is coming into a position where it can be seen, usually emerging from the darkness, emerging from the water suddenly, like a submarine or a swamp creature coming to eat you. And lewd usually has something to do with some inappropriate sexual nature. Maybe somebody was exposing themselves to other people. Maybe some people were making some oogie boogie in the back rooms. Who knows? But a report is now out that some naughty was going on in the Australian Parliament. Well, getting over down under, I guess. Moving on. John Oliver calls out Meghan McCain's response to the Atlanta shootings. Apparently, her response was not good enough for John Oliver, and so called her out. He singled her out, and it's like pointing on, hey, that one is not good, and so selecting one out of a group and then vocally, verbally, in a loud public fashion, identifying that person and drawing criticism on it. Yeah, something like that. Not so eloquent. And so, that's the moment where we'll take a sip of coffee. All right. Weary Israelis head to the polls for the fourth election in 2 years. That's right, there's going to be another election. They're heading to the ballot boxes to cast their vote in yet another election. Fourth election in 2 years, I would be weary too. But what does weary mean? It means tired. very, very tired. Let's say exhausted. And probably not even just physically tired, but mentally exhausted from all of the nonstop campaigning and advertisement and placards and posters on the street and other things just invading their visual and audio space, driving them a little bit up the wall and crazy. But, well, yes, they are tired of it. Hopefully the election goes smoothly and, well, stay tuned. We'll see how this all plays out. Moving on. Could China's aggressive Xinjiang sanctions counterpunch risk alienating the European Union? That's a bit of a mouthful there. They are taking aggressive sanctions, but not just sanctions. The U.S. and other countries have put sanctions, economic penalties, and taxes, tariffs, other sort of things against China for their conduct in Xinjiang. And now China is putting sanctions back on the U.S. and probably the European Union in a counterpunch. If you do punch this way, then somebody counterpunches that way. The prefix there with the hyphen counter means in the opposite direction. Just think counterattack, counterstrike, counter-argument, counterclockwise, counter-argument. Lots of different counters out there, and it just means in the opposite direction. Yeah, and so they're taking some actions back against those people who first put sanctions on them. And as we know, sanctions rarely actually work for persuading governments to do anything. It actually just penalizes and hurts the actual citizens of the country who do not suffer the consequences of said sanctions. And so they are relatively ineffective. Yet, what other options do we have other than economic penalties? We can't just go and invade. That would be very, very dangerous. Oh yeah, and to risk alienating the European Union. To alienate somebody is to isolate them, to get them, to cast them out, so that way they then become outcasts. And so then they're creating tension in this relationship, and then the European Union's like, no, I don't want anything to do with you. And so it creates a distance. It creates a deep divide between the two parties. And so therefore any additional progress is basically rendered impossible. Yeah. Moving on. Some more sad news. Well, the news all too often are too sad. A surfing prodigy who is 22 years old has been killed or was killed after being struck by lightning. That's not a way that I would like to die. At least it's probably quick, but who really knows? Either way here, being struck, we've got a passive construction with a gerund after the preposition, because after prepositions we like nouns or gerunds, and so here we have after being struck by lightning, because lightning strikes. Or you could also say after being hit by lightning, but this is a little bit more visually evocative and dramatic. And well, as we know, the writers at CNN do like dramatic headlines. If somebody is a prodigy, this is usually used to refer to very young people who demonstrate an almost natural born, innate skill for some sort of task or activity, much like chess or some sort of sport or mathematics or art. Somebody who's very, very good at something, usually at a very young age. Maybe inordinately good considering the amount of experience that they have had in their short lives to practice said activity. Moving on. Here we've just got a nice little fixed phrase. If a robotic dog works wonders in the emergency room in the age of COVID-19. A robotic dog, not so sure how or what it is doing, but if it works wonders, that means it's working wonderfully. It means it's working very, very well. I don't know what this dog is doing. Read the article and let me know. I want to know about how robot dogs are helping us in our emergency rooms. Maybe they're boosting people's spirits, even if it's not a real dog. If it can show affection and provide some companionship to the people who are in the hospital, then hey, more power to them. Keep using those robot dogs, I guess. Moving on. The brutal reality of a Kremlin-backed regime. Forgot to highlight that. A regime is a government. However, usually it's a government of a particular persuasion, of a particular type. My guess is that it is probably going to be some sort of authoritarian regime, a dictatorial regime. Yes, that's right. It's usually used for authoritarians and or dictators, not a democratic government. But it can be applied as such, the Trump regime. But even with Trump, it still does not feel quite right with me. It does not sit quite right. We reserve regime for those other governments in other countries that have those types of governments, authoritative, dictatorial. Yes, moving on. Kremlin-backed. If something is backed by something else, the regime is backed by the Kremlin. That means it is supported by them. It has their back. It stands behind them to help support them and push them upward and forward. Yeah. Backed, supported. Moving on. Goldman Sachs CEO responds to, dependent preposition, a survey describing the inhumane 95-hour work weeks and abuse. Yes, well, 95-hour work weeks sound really, really depressing. And in this case, it is being claimed that they are inhumane, which basically means a crime against humanity, or a crime against animals as well. The ASPCA, the American Association for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, but they often are protesting against the inhumane conditions in which animals are kept, and the ways that they are treated. And so yes, inhumane is just, it's a crime against humanity. How these new hires at Goldman Sachs apparently are living and forced to work. I don't know. Moving on. This is a good one. It says, our city is a Tinder right now. Miami Beach extends state of emergency. Now, one might associate Tinder, the app dating or Oogie Boogie application, with Miami Beach and spring break because people like to hook up. But in this case, it also brings to light the reason why Tinder is called Tinder. If you're going to light a fire, first off, you need some fuel, which is typically wood. But wood in and of itself doesn't like to burn, so we need smaller pieces of wood that's kindling. But even kindling, it's hard to light with a match because little sticks take a little bit more heat and more fire to get going. And so we've got firewood, then we've got kindling, and then we've got tinder. It might be the little fragments of wood or wood shavings and dust, which then allow the fire to grow much more rapidly. Hence, the name of the dating application. And in the past, Tinder was often kept in a small box, so that way it could stay dry, so that way if you're moving around, no matter what, you were always able to start a fire. And so sometimes we use the phrase, something is a tinder box, meaning that it is ready to catch fire, to ignite, and or possibly explode in flames at a moment's notice with the slightest agitation or spark. And so basically what they're saying, the mayor of Miami, is saying that the city is ready to explode, basically. Because you've got all these spring breakers and you've got the police trying to stop the safety hazard. They're not wearing masks. And yes, it's a dangerous situation, potentially explosive, or at least incendiary. Moving on. An airborne laboratory flies 50 feet above the ocean. Airborne, pretty obvious. It's on an airplane. It is flying. And you don't think about it much, but airborne? Why do we say airborne? Well, it comes from the verb to bear. And to bear. No, we're not talking about the big scary animals that might eat you or at least severely damage you. The verb to bear means to carry. Just like you hear in the United States, there is the Second Amendment to the Constitution, which is the right to bear arms, which means to carry guns or weapons, which is why we have so many of them. And yes, to bear a child means to carry a child. For a pregnant woman, in this case, this airplane or this laboratory is being born or is being carried by the air. And so just a little linguistic breakdown of airborne, it means flying, because the air is carrying the vessel or the vehicle through the air. Ta-da. All right, whatever. Not so important, but if it helps you remember and maybe learn the verb bear, then I've done my job for today. Let's move on. This is interesting, just piece of engineering news. World's first ship tunnel is going to be built, is supposed to be built under Norwegian mountains. That's right, they're making a ship tunnel for ships to sail through, probably shortening the journey from some port or harbor to the actual sea, and therefore it will cut down on emissions and use of fuel, I guess. But we've got a nice infinitive passive here, which we often use for things that are set to happen, are planned to happen. Yeah, that's it. But interesting feat of engineering, and I can't wait to see it done. I don't know why, but tunnels fascinate me. Moving on. 5 big signs that travel is roaring back. Yes, travel was at a standstill. Travel was not traveling for most of the last year during the pandemic for obvious safety reasons. But it's not coming back slowly in a little trickle. But it's roaring back. It's making a lot of noise like a train passing by, roaring by. And so it's coming back in a very big way and apparently very quickly. Ta-da. All right, moving on. Connie Chung, the prolific and long-time Asian American telejournalist. Excuse me. The media is miserably late covering anti-Asian violence. Yes, if something is miserable, it is very, very sad, and this is sadly late for covering anti-Asian violence. This has come to light and come to the forefront of the news in the past couple weeks. However, what she is saying is this is not something new. This has always existed. It just didn't make the headlines as much as other forms of anti-ethnic group violence, much like, well, anti-Latino, anti-black, etc. This has always been there. It just wasn't spoken about. It wasn't covered by the news. So she says, and so I believe. And so let's move on. This country has just been named, has been called, has been identified as the world's happiest. The happiest country, well, the top 5 countries, as usual, are kind of huddled around the North Sea. I believe it was Holland, Denmark, Finland, and Sweden, or something along those lines. And, well, Denmark is the winner again. Hot dog, Denmark, well done, Copenhagen, and all the residents of Denmark, congratulations on being the happiest, but I guess you don't need me to congratulate you because you are already so happy. How about the rest of the world takes a few notes from whatever it is that you're doing right, because God knows it's not the weather that makes you so happy. What's the secret? Well, scientists have been trying to unravel this mystery for countless years, and they've identified a few key factors. However, other countries seem to just ignore them and continue going about their business as usual instead of trying to learn from the example that is being set by the Scandinavian and otherwise that area countries who are so happy. All right. All right. Stenyak's excited about that. All right. Bravo. Moving on. A serial stowaway has been arrested again at Chicago's O'Hare Airport. Has been arrested because she is in custody of the police and being held by them so she doesn't try one of her little adventures again. A stowaway is a person who hides on an airplane or a ship traveling illegally without having paid for said travel. Back in the day, people would hide inside the cargo hold of a ship and travel around the world or wherever from port to port. This lady is doing it on airplanes, or at least attempting to. And by this word cereal here, we're not talking about breakfast cereal. We're talking about something that happens in a series. And it's a nice adjective, letting you know that there were multiple attempts. We hear the phrase serial entrepreneur, somebody who sets up one business after another. She has hidden on airplanes, or tried to, several times over the past decade. And one time she was actually successful enough to travel from Chicago O'Hare to London without a ticket or a passport. I got to say, I doff my cap to you. Kudos to you, but she's also been arrested several other times, hanging around the security gates of airports hoping to sneak through. Yes, she is suffering from some mental problems, apparently. And, well, she's now in custody of the police. She has been arrested and hopefully will receive some treatment for her mental condition. I don't know. That's what I'm guessing. Moving on. Trump's presidency was a disaster for his business. Yes, a disaster. Usually associated with natural disasters like volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, hurricanes, tornadoes, etc. And that is an unexpected event which causes an incredible amount of damage. However, this situation was predictable, and a disaster just means a horrible, or an event or an occurrence or some sort of thing that has a horrible effect on something else. And, well, somewhat, I think we could have foreseen and could have predicted this. I think he was hoping it would have an opposite effect, and some estimations show that it did have at least partially positive effect for some of his businesses and properties. However, as taken as a whole, I think it has been disastrous for his businesses, because he basically alienated, vocabulary from above, and or ostracized countless other people through his incessant polarization of every single issue, and, well, mismanagement of virtually everything he touched. All right, moving on. Martin Luther King III, this is what my father would have done. Obviously, Martin Luther King Jr., his father is not with us, the famous civil rights leader and author and performer of the I Have a Dream, probably one of the most famous speeches of the 20th century. He is, not able to comment on things or do things because he was mercilessly assassinated. But what he would have done in the situation, we're hypothesizing, and so there's a nice hypothetical past there. Moving on. This shameful vote by 172 Republicans, I'm not sure what they're referring to. I didn't have time to read the article. I apologize to you. But if it was shameful, it was full of shame. Shame is a very strong emotion that, maybe you do something wrong and you feel a little bit embarrassed, right? Your cheeks turn red. You get that sinking feeling in your stomach. Well, this is like embarrassment squared, tripled. It's exponentiated embarrassment, where you have done something really, really wrong. Your stomach should hit rock bottom, turn in a circle, and you should put your tail between your legs and go hide in a corner, much like a dog who pooped on the carpet in your living room by accident and now is just feeling humiliated by his own actions. Basically, these 172 Republicans, I don't know what they did that was shameful, but it goes against everything that was right, I guess, and so they should be ashamed of themselves. So the author thinks. Moving on. Joe Biden's honeymoon is ending. He has been happily married for something like 40 years, or no, less, because for quite some time to Dr. Jill Biden. However, they're not talking about his marriage. They're talking about the sweet, sweet period of time, much like after a wedding, that honeymoon where everything is all lovey-dovey and you maybe go on a holiday to a beach somewhere. his honeymoon period in his presidency. Often when somebody is newly elected or put into some sort of position, maybe at a job or you move to a new city, there's that initial period of time where everything is rainbows and ponies and flowers and butterflies. But then after a while, the reality starts to sink in. And especially with the president, there's a lot of eyes on you, there's a lot of expectations, and so things, after those first little bit, things start to get a little bit more difficult. You start to realize, you get that sinking feeling like, ooh, man, maybe there's a lot that needs to be done. Maybe this is not as great as I had originally thought. And moreover, in his position, you got people criticizing you from all sides. All right. Moving on. Nearly there, folks. We've had it on the show several times recently, but I just love it because it sparks. Spark a conversation, spark an argument, spark a protest, spark discontent, spark life. Lightning may have sparked life on Earth. It may have given that initial to light the fire that became all of the glorious plants and animals that we see today. To spark something means to cause it to happen, much like a fire. Moving on. 8 eating habits that can interfere with your sleep. It can mess with your sleep. We had mess with on the show the other day. To cause problems for, to bother, to interrupt, to interfere with. Yes, eating large meals before you go to sleep, that can cause a problem. I know if I eat too much before I go to bed, it gives me nightmares. But yes, I wonder what the other 7 habits could be. Click the link, read the article, let me know. Moving on. And a top secret Cold War project turned up plants that once thrived between a mile-deep Greenland ice. Exciting and also dangerous because we don't know. They keep digging up old bacteria and old plants and old things from thousands of years ago, and we have no idea how it might affect us nowadays. But these plants that came up from under the ice once thrived. They were growing very fast. They were very happy down there. Oh, life is great here under the ice. And so they were flourishing. They were thriving. They were growing quickly, reproducing, and everything was amazing for them. But because it says that they once thrived, apparently things changed and then the conditions worsened. They no longer thrived and then maybe actually just died off. Yep. So that's it for the news today. Thanks everybody for tuning in. I will be on again at 8 p.m. tonight for another crossword. Hope to see you there. If not, have a great day. Get it started on the right foot if you're in this part of the world, or sweet dreams if you're out there somewhere else. Much love. Take it easy. See you tonight. Bye-bye. Yes, stop the stream.